because I try to start class out with a little bit more invigorating discussion than boring you with some of this stuff, because it's kind of hard reading. Essentially what I'm doing is writing a boring text, right? And you may find it boring. But I encourage you to read it, because I'm working very hard on trying to convey some important sociological concepts. You know that you don't test in here, but you need to know sociological concepts. So when you write your papers at the end of the semester, I need to get a sense that you understand sociology. In other words, you have to prove to me that you know sociology. And one of the ways to do that is to grasp the concepts, ask me questions, and embed the concepts into your paper. So when I get a final paper about anything you want it to be on, if it's just 12 pages of rambling, I'll know that you didn't come to class, you didn't engage in conversation, you don't understand sociology, you might not get a good grade. But if you really absorb the concepts that we discussed here to begin class with, some of the ones that I relate here, I even put them in bold in the blog, I just want you to kind of really know sociology, and if I really get a sense that you know it, then we don't have to have tests, and the world is closer to utopia for you all. So I've done a blog about poverty, work, and class, but I haven't mentioned anything about wages or unfair labor practices or anything like unions or organized labor. These are some of the concepts that we talked about last week and a little bit in the discussion to start class. What I've gone is in the direction of theoretical thought. Early in the course, because the course is shaped like your papers, you're going to learn a little bit of theory. Early in your paper, you're going to present a little bit of theory, because the way that you process through the scientific method is you start with theories and hypotheses of what things might be like in the world, and then you try to support or negate those hypotheses. So you start with a hypothesis, as you might know, an educated guess about something specific. I might hypothesize in this class that the majority of students exit Adrian College with between $50,000 and $100,000 in debt. That might be a hypothesis. Pretty clear-cut educated guess, right? Educated based on the fact that I know now how much tuition is. I'm going to factor in my head a little bit about scholarships and grant funding, and then I'm going to go from there, even dropout rates and stuff like that. So that's a very specific hypothesis. But a broader theory come out of that would be something like private school students are more likely to pursue graduate education and therefore get more higher ed debt. That's actually a hypothesis, actually. I didn't even get to the theory yet. Theory might be something like private school college students are necessary in a system that also involves community colleges and public universities, because that's the best way that the higher ed system functions. That's more of a theory, right? That can't really be proven, and you can't really prove the fact that the system has to work this way and we need all of these parts together. That's more of a broad theory about how the world works. The same type of theory can be applied to rich and poor people in middle class. What I just described with the college structure was, okay, you've got kind of this higher echelon, you've got this middle echelon, and you've got this lower echelon of higher ed institutions. And my theory is that you need all three of those levels to work in an organized civil society. If you were doing a paper on economics and wage labor, you might say that we need the high income, we need the middle class to a certain proportion, and we need the lower class to a certain proportion. This could be your theory. We'll come to find out that theory might be called structural functionalism, a theory that kind of says that we all play a role in the world, and you need kind of the poor people and you need the rich people because everyone's role fits into place in the structure that helps us produce the greatest function, and so kind of semantically then the theory is called structural functionalism. So that's the broader theory. And your paper is going to have some type of theory about how the world works, how the whole world works. And then you're going to kind of whittle that down to a hypothesis, how this specific phenomenon, this class, debt, or something, some phenomenon works. So start with a big theory, how the world works. Whittle it down to, well, how does this phenomenon specifically work? And then you're going to test it through a scientific method. So, one of the ways that you can test phenomenon are through ways of categorizing. I've already categorized economically the high income, middle class, and low income. I've categorized schools into private, public, and community colleges. So sociologists basically, everything we do, we categorize, which is kind of funny because most of us want everyone to be equal, yet we categorize and group and separate people. We all want to live, not all of us, but most sociologists are going to want to eliminate gender stereotypes and, of course, eliminate racism, yet we classify things into race in general. Okay? So you're going to want to aim to categorize, the whole word up there, something in your project. So if you're thinking about football and you want to talk about pro and amateur athletes, those are categorized. If you want to talk about Canadian Football League and National Football League, those are categories. And so those would be sort of institutional categories. If you want to write a paper about football and you want to look at white and black athletes, you'd be categorizing based on race. If you want to talk about high school and pro versus high school versus pro in some way, shape, or form, maybe actually maybe college versus pro as far as pay scale, you might be looking at a category of age. If you want to talk about women's sports in college versus men's sports and how men's sports tend to produce a greater revenue, you might be doing a paper on gender. I already talked a little bit about income, ways to categorize. A fifth category is education level, and a sixth is family structure. For example, if you're doing something on categories of income level, you might say, well, people who come from two-parent households tend to grow up to make more money in their professional careers. So you'd be writing a paper on family structure and income. You said, girls who grow up with fathers in the home tend to marry more frequently than girls who grow up in a fatherless home. You'd be working on a little bit of gender and a little bit of family structure. Okay? So these 6 categories are the most basic ones that sociologists use in studies. These 6 categories are not the only 6, but they're the 6 easiest ones. And these 6 categories combine into what is called socioeconomic status, the vocab term that you should definitely learn in an intro to social class. Your socioeconomic status, SES. Socioeconomic status is important because, as we talked about last week, the definition of class isn't really based on one element. In other words, if you said, who's high class, who's low class, male or female, you can't really say, well, males are high class all the time and females are, no, you can't say that. Well, is it based on income? Well, not really, because someone like Gandhi is pretty high class, but he's in total poverty. Mother Teresa, she's a pretty high class person, but she's in total poverty, so it's not necessarily based on income. So when you talk about the status or the class of person, it's really going to come down to more than one variable. So these elements of socioeconomic status, SES, all 6 of these can be variables that then influence outcomes. So if you are really trying to figure out who becomes professional athletes the most, you could use these variables just like you would a chemistry experiment. If you want to figure out who becomes the wealthiest in America, you could use these variables. Or if you just want to figure out who is less likely to shoot themselves, okay? Suicide studies in your time are popular, and also health studies like cancer rate. What's cancer the most? You might find it's actually based on perhaps a race or a gender, like breast cancer. So we're trying to kind of figure out the problems in the world, or even not problems, just phenomenon that we can't understand. And we're going to try to base those on scientific studies using these elements of socioeconomic status as variables. We're going to categorize people, and we're going to look at elements that make up their individualness. What makes you different than me? Okay, you make this income, I make this. You're female, I'm male. You're black, I'm white. You are married, I'm not. So we can be different in these ways. Burrow presented last week these 4 categories of sociological knowledge. You have professional, critical, policy, and public. I could redefine these as like professional executives or even workers. Critical is mostly academia, and policy is your governmental, your lawmakers. And then you have the public. So I talked a little bit in this blog about the public thing and how it's different than the rest of these categories. I would hypothesize that the professional category is going to have higher educated people than the general public. There are a lot of people that work in McDonald's in the general public. If you did a survey on their education level versus a more professional, say a law firm, you might find that the law firm has higher education level than the general public. General public meaning anybody on the street. You might find that government policymakers, lawmakers, Congress is like 99% male and also like 99% white. So you might find that this category is slanted one way. But the public, I hypothesize, is the most disparate, meaning the most different, varied amalgamation or group of socioeconomic status qualities. And that's why I try to personally craft and create and convey a message that reaches the public. Remember, Burrow's speech, which is written down, so you can look at it as an article, but it's more of it was a speech. It says, why should we do sociological research, and who should we do it for? For what purpose? And he puts out those 4 categories, but I think it's pretty unfair to specifically conduct sociological research for any one of those 3 categories on this side because they're exclusive groups. I think this is personal, bias, but I think that sociology should be done for the public because the public is the most largest and most applicable group that the research can reach and can be done on. I talked a little bit about a hypothesis. That's your educated guess. I kind of assume that everyone knows the basic gist of what a hypothesis is, so I don't go in depth on what a hypothesis is. If you want to know more, send me an email or read this or Google it or something. Empirical knowledge, so I'm trying to get from my theory through my hypotheses to results. And I'm trying to shape my hypotheses, I'm trying to shape my experiment. How might I come up with my hypotheses? Like, where do I get these ideas that I think Congress is mostly white males? I think that McDonald's workers are probably less educated than lawyers. Where do I get these? Do I just like invent these in my head? Like, where did this? So like maybe I read them? Maybe I did some research. How else might I come up with this assumption? Where did I get my assumption from? Observation? So like I go into a law firm and I get pinched, drug charge or something. I need a lawyer. And I go, everybody's wearing suits, and I got diplomas hanging on walls. Then I go into McDonald's, everybody's wearing blue, and name tags, and boots, and they don't have suits on, and there's no diplomas hanging on walls. So my mind is doing what? I'm creating this experience in my head that lawyers are more educated than McDonald's employees. Then I'm watching, or I'm growing up and I'm learning about money and what it means to have money. And I'm learning in my middle school class that, if you work hard and you get a good education, you're going to make more money. So I see lawyers have more money than McDonald's employees, and I'm kind of putting all the pieces together, and I'm saying, you know what, lawyers, they got more money, they have more education than McDonald's workers. So it's an empirical knowledge that's kind of everything all together, mostly based on observation and experience. Observation even that I observed in books. I always look at empirical knowledge too, and I look at the first part of the word as empire. The empire is huge, right? It's a big empire. So that's how I think of empirical knowledge, because sometimes I forget what it means. I'm like, what is empirical knowledge? Well, it kind of everything, all encompass observation, experience, things observed that you absorb over your life. So I'm trying to get some more empirical knowledge outside of just my experiences. I'm trying to support or negate those social facts that I've come to believe exist. I also make note in here on the blog about socially constructed elements. I just kind of explained some. So before the break, I gave you insight into me that I am the brokest one in the room. Why did you think otherwise? Pretty easy question. Why did you think that I was not the poorest person in this room? Because I'm educated, or I would have an education to have to work here. I have a steady job. Yeah, I'm hired to work here, right? I dress pretty. I like to think I dress straight in. This is the express pants and top. I don't pay a lot of money. So, that's cool, right? I mean, what, banana report? Yeah. So, all of the things that all of the elements that you just threw out, the way I dress, my job, and my, whatever else you said. These are elements that combine together almost like a molecule, almost, in science. You construct my being from the things that you see of me. The way I dress, maybe you might think that I'm kind of confident in the way, oh, I can get up here and I can talk. He must be successful, right?
Judging the book by its cover.
Yeah, but how do you get to that judgment? The course of your life has kind of formed your thoughts. You put things together. You see people in suits. You think that they have money. You don't see a lot of homeless people walking around like this, driving cars, going there. You know, like it's a construction that you're like, okay, that he looks like that cover of that book looks like this, and this. You've constructed it through social elements, socioeconomic status variables. You've socially constructed what I am. You already think that you know me when you figured me out. Just by what you see, you socially constructed my entire existence. Just like the point you were making earlier, we socially construct the homeless person's existence. Just by looking, we see them, we already think that we know exactly what's going on. Social construction. Okay, so no matter what we think is going on, no matter what we think about attorneys and McDonald's workers and football players, or me, nobody's ever done a study on me. I don't recommend it. It's going to be too exciting. Whatever you think is going on, remember, theoretically or from a narrow perspective, your very specific hypothesis, you have to prove it. And the proof, as I stated last week, really comes through in the scientific method. So this is kind of a loosely explained steps of the scientific method. You develop your research question, you kind of make some more observations, not just your past observations, but some kind of current observations. The point I want to make there is people that write about family, most people, not most, some students that write about family make the mistake of telling how they grew up, and that does not belong in your paper. What you need to do is make observations about how other people are growing up. Sort of make an observation. State a hypothesis or hypotheses, do your experiment, analyze the data, and then draw conclusions. That's how you support or negate your point. And your whole experiment is based around your research question. Your research question has to be very specific. What do you want to find out? Say it in a question. No more than 2 questions. we'll work on research questions later on. So my research question in this little blog is coming from the place that I think there are exclusive groups. And this week was on poverty. So I don't think that being in poverty is a very exclusive group. And by exclusive group, I mean groups that are tough to get into. If I wanted to be in poverty right now, if I wanted to be homeless, would anyone argue the fact that I could be homeless right now if I wanted to, right? I could just like be homeless. That's not a fetch, not an exclusive group. If I wanted to be a lawyer, that's a pretty exclusive group, right? Like I can't just go practice law. What do I have to do? Go to law school, pass the bar. That's an exclusive group, and with exclusivity comes privilege, be it economic, incentive, or otherwise. So going back to my prior table, I think that those three groups, aside from the public, are kind of exclusive. It kind of bugs me, so it kind of drives my research. And that's the same should be true with you. Whatever bugs you about society, whatever you think is a little bit off, whatever is not part of your utopia, you should figure out why it exists, and how it'll change or not change. Just kind of explain that part of how the world works. So you should also make mention of some social facts in your project. And for that, I want to play a little, hopefully it's loud enough, video. 34 minutes. Oh, we'll do that later. See if you like this guy better than me. I love this stuff.
Okay.
You ever watched this guy before? You can take a whole class from Yale.
I think I'm more here also. So how do we observe social facts? The social facts are things. And what we need is a rigorous discipline, right, for social analysis. And that also implies that we have to get rid of all of our preconceptions. We have to define the objects of our investigations independently from our values. So the value-free science, what he argues, I will say not quite. And we have to get rid of those data which are too subjective. So the social facts are things, objects. Well, this is a very interesting citation, but you would not expect from data and to come. It's almost like Karl Marx in the German anthropology, right? The proper science should not proceed from ideas to things, but from things to ideas. Right? It's almost identical to the German ideology. But you, of course, need something different, right? The things are not property relations, right? The things are actual collective manifestations, right? Collective ideas. So the notion of thing is used here in a very unique and very different thing. But what he emphasizes, right, that they are not the individual ideas, but they are kind of crystallized, and it's out there over us, like things, what we cannot change, individuals cannot really change. And he said, well, social sciences evolve just like natural sciences by getting rid of prejudices, right? And dogmas, moving beyond dogmas, and substitute them with the study of facts. That's what Bacon, the philosopher, in the 17th century suggested. All scientific investigation should start from induction, from the observance of sensually observable facts, So he invokes Bacon, right? That this is the scientific method, right? Well, it is not necessarily sensuous, necessarily, which is emphasized in Durkheim, but moving beyond preconceptions and dogmas. And he said, well, the theory should be only introduced when science is sufficiently at the advanced stage. Well, this is a very good advice to people who are graduate students and are doing dissertations. Don't start with theory, right? Start by analyzing social facts, and when we are sufficiently advanced, that's when we find proper theory. But
I agree. It's really good stuff. You need to watch that. So, it's really, really, really good stuff. The only thing that gets me more excited than being here working with you is watching that guy. So, a couple points that he made. First, when you do sociological research, you need to first get rid of your subjective ideas. You need to focus on being objective. You need to get rid of your prejudice and dogma. Omit the subjective thoughts that you may have. And you really need to go in like a scientist, and you need to be very objective. So I'm going to say this in week 2 because for those of you who think marriage is a great thing, or those of you who think capitalism is wonderful, or whatever you really think right now, that's great, that's fine. More power to you. But when you do your study, what you have to do is when you go in, you have to go in rid of prejudice and subjective thoughts and ideas. This is especially true for like race and gender. If you think like white supremacy is awesome and men are the best species or whatever, like you have to kind of push that aside and go and do your study scientific. And then you're going to come up with a hypothesis that's shaped through your observances throughout life. And then you're going to try to support or negate that hypothesis, even if I agree with it or I don't. You're going to try to get to social facts, starting with the idea, sorry, the concept idea. The ideas lead to things. Things, social facts, which are manifestations in the form of collective ideas. So what this means is we have an idea that is individualized in a student in the back who wants to work hard to achieve certain goals. But this then leads to the collective thought of the class to successfully pass the course, eventually get a job, and get a house. American collective idea in the form of the American dream, which then kind of plays out as this social fact of, you might call it a Protestant ethic or just the American dream. You call it the American dream. So does it start with the American dream? Does it start with the idea? You can go back and forth on that. Just understanding that you should start with the observance, the displayed behavior, if you want to go look at a displayed behavior, or just a displayed idea. And that leads to the collective action manifestation, which is the social fact. That's what he was explaining his discussion on Durkheim. It's really good stuff. I could have had you all read Durkheim. You would have loved it. I would have lost every single one. So, to restate what I talked about in the blog, you have Burrow 4 main groups: professional, critical, policy, and public sectors. Categorizing is a key component of sociological thought. What other ways would be categorized? Talked about some of those. Your SES variables, those are the 6 basic ones that I came up with. These are descriptive and the most common, but that's not a limited set there. one of the hypotheses that I developed in the blog that I did was that the public has more disparate SES variables. That's an educated guess based on my empirical knowledge, my observed experiences. Do you agree? Why or why not? We talked a lot about that in the first part of class. Our identities, which we also talked about in the first part of class, how are our identities formed? Are they shaped by SES variables? Are they shaped by other things? You can kind of do the cart before the horse argument. Is your identity shaped by social facts or social institutions? Or do you think that you just cognitively, out of nowhere, have the idea to pursue money and fame and fortune? Do you think you just automatically have those, or do you think you got them from a collective social conscience? This reminds me of what I talked about in my intro to religion class when I was in undergrad. My intro to religion class, one of the things that I remember, it was like a long time ago, so you know it's a good thing, was my religion professor said, "So I want you to think about religion. If you were on a desert island, right, and you were put there as a baby, somehow by some miracle, grew up and you're 30 years old, would you have any concept of, well, let me ask you, what would you possess? If you were put on a desert island as a baby, some miracle, now you're 35 years old, what would you possess as far as skills, abilities?
Survival.
Yeah, like what type of survival tactic?
Build a fire, kill people.
So you could kill people, you could eat.
Yeah,
What if there were two people on your island?
work together.
Communication, you might even have a language, and so that was religion class. So would you have developed religion?
Probably not.
No. Don't. So that's not the discussion of this class, but the relation here is that is an idea of, are you a cognitivist, are you a behaviorist, or are you sort of sociologist, or are you a psychologist? So like if you're a cognitivist, which is the school that I came from, perhaps you would think that there's something in the brain that would cause you to develop your thoughts of religion and communication and survival. If you were more from a sociological standpoint, the communication would actually result on social interaction. You wouldn't just be born with the DNA to communicate. You would develop it out of social reasons. So, our identities shaped by these socioeconomic status variables. Do they come straight from our head, or do they come through society? That's the most basic way to put it. Poverty is a good example of a social construction. We talked about when you look at a homeless person, you immediately, maybe not immediately, you kind of map out their whole life story. Try to. We talked about exclusion. I said that the public is probably the least exclusive group. Exclusive groups are academia, the government, and the working class. For example, you need to be hired to actually work. You can't just go plow a field and harvest it. Especially in America, you have to be over 16 or 15 to work. You have to be probably documented with a work visa or have a social security card in order to be elected in the government. To be president, you have to be born in America. To be in academia, you have to be accepted to the school. Very exclusive clubs where you get rights to membership once you gain acceptance. So, kind of the question is exclusion a social fact? I don't know if you follow this. Somebody had the idea that exclusion, that they were excluded, or did society kind of tell them? Was it manifested collectively? That's something for you to debate. You can watch this whole hour-long lecture. Yeah, awesome. That was the 25th of the series, so it's got to be one more at least. Social facts are things, objects in the form of collective ideas. They're not individualized ideas, but they are ideas that we cannot change. That's one thought. And should the proper science go from things to ideas, or from ideas to things? All ideas should originate from observable facts. Those are the key concepts to hang out. The slides are posted on our website, and the blog is great. The link to the Yale lecture address. The things that I want to make sure you're aware of before we leave tonight, I went on order, are how to gain access to articles, be part of an exclusive club, name it. Email and a book. I'm going to try to emphasize the book in the later lectures, and I encourage you to also have access to the book. So, does anybody here know how to access a scholarly academic journal article? If you do? Fantastic. Through Adrian? Awesome. So, for the rest of you, this is how you do it. This is something that you need to know to pass the class. You're going to have to cite 6 scholarly academic journal articles. If you don't get 6, basically, assignment. So, like, you, I don't know, I hate to say fail, to speak negative. You need to get academic journal articles. It's like very important. So this is how you do it. That's how I do it. I Google Adrian College Library. That's my first step. And it gives me this link right here. Adrian.edu/academic/Shipman-library. Okay? Pretty easy to find. I just Google Adrian College Library. I click the link. I get to this web page. Pretty good icons there. See, I go to this link right here, and it says find articles. Click that link. This is why we don't have a book. Free chapters of books. This is my favorite one, JSTOR. You can use any one that you want. I'm just going to show you JSTOR real quick. It's right there. Click JSTOR, J-S-T-O-R. You do this page. They're trying to go more and more be like Google. So there used to be like, you know, you do an advanced search criteria and all this. Now you just type in your search like Google. Or you could do their new search. I don't know, it's probably the same thing. So one thing that interests me is race and sports. I always think and write about race, sports, inequality. Up comes journal articles. This one puts them here. So I'm just going to read you a couple of the titles.
We have to like have 6 people.
Yeah, by the end of the course, yeah. I'm going to have to cite 6. Does divisional play lead to more pennant races? That's not about race. It's about the pennant race. I get it. Never seen that one. Race, cultural capital, and the educational effects of participation in sports. You probably love that one. Right? Sports, inequality. I mean, come on, it doesn't get better than that, right? Race, cultural capital, which is a key concept of the course, and the educational, your academic effects of participation in sport. That has so much promise. I'm sure that's wonderful. Inequality among equals, setting market and authority in league sports. So if you had any desire to study the economic market of professional sports, I'm sure this one's great. Couldn't get more generic. Sport and society. There you go. Sport and society. I'll talk more about what these might be. These, at least one of them, could be like a book review. I mean, a journal. You won't be doing book. You won't be reading book review. You'll be reading journal articles. Sometimes they mix them together. So that's how you find the article when you want to read it.
We do like 3 of them all the time.
Well, we'll talk more about it, but at this point, I just want you to know how to find it. Okay? You're going to need 6, and they're going to be from journals that I recommend: American Journal of Sociology, American Sociological Review, or any really good sociology journal. So I click the link, I got to this page, I click view PDF. I have to accept the terms and conditions. I'm surprised that it didn't ask me to log in. Maybe it's because I'm on this wireless stuff. Or whatever. Usually you have to log in. If you're off campus, you might have to log in. You have to do your login. So here's the article. Okay, this is an abstract. I mentioned abstracts earlier. I said they were half a page. There you go. There's one right there. Yours, when you write it, should be patterned like this. I'll teach you how to write it. We're going to try to do that early on in the process. See, it's from Florida International University, co-authorship. You can co-author your papers for this class. You do anything that's like real journals. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Yes, you are active researchers. You are writing like you are a journal writer. You're going to publish an article for this stuff. So that does not mean just finding stuff, facts in a book and copying them. So I don't like tests, so I don't like books. Totally doing that. That's one you should present during the method section. Teach people F9. Or else I'll get it. So there's an article. You can write. But I'll clarify that more. You probably have some type of IRB here, which if you did actual experiments would get me into trouble. So you might actually propose the experiments, but do it in the way that you would actually do it. So that's how you get a journal article. Any questions on how to find a journal article? Early on, that's how you do it. You go to the library, click the links, find one, do your search term, get it, check them out. They're all about 12 pages.
I'm referring otherwise to research and stuff like that. So then our research method that we choose, like if we do a survey or something like that, that's our experiment?
Yep. Yeah. You want to think methodology, experimentation, those are. We'll be saying methodology more. I just say experiment because more people understand it. You're going to do an experiment. But really, you're going to be conducting it. Okay. And, Adrian, oh, actually, I'll do this from my website. So here we are on the course syllabus. Okay, so this is my website course syllabus that I gave you guys last week. What you want to do is click Blackboard right there. It should be familiar, but I know a lot of you are just starting out as freshmen. You click Blackboard and you get to this. This is the bb.adrian.edu. You type in your username, which you should have by now. If you don't, get it. If you have problems with that, email me. I'll try to help you with it. This is the course page. I don't use it that much, but you can either click the course page and send email, or just, I think, click send email there. However you want to do email, this is just one way. Click the class, this class. You can email all instructors or all people in the class, whatever, however this works. But you probably have a different way to check email, but this is a way that you could email me. It's one way. There are many ways. I want you all to be aware of how this all works, because it's an expectation. So you need to know how to do email. Also here is a link. Again, this is the syllabus for the class. You click Adrian Gmail there, that link, get you to this page. Okay, and you type in your username and your password, and you log in. And what you get is a Gmail page. You probably got this as orientation, but I just want to make sure everybody knows how to do this. So this is like your inbox. There's your compose. There's your inbox. Mine all forwards to my actual Gmail, so I don't have any. But also at the top here, there's some important things. Okay. Like Drive, click Drive. This is your Google Drive that comes with your school account. So you go into Create, Document, just like Microsoft Office. Again, you probably got this at orientation. You type something, you make a title for it called Social 104 paper. Okay, there's my title, there's my paper. Go up to the top here, there's a padlock. It says it's private, only I can see it, so nobody else on the web can see it. But you can share it. So here's the link. Here's the way to change the status. It's private right now. You either make it totally public, I'd love that, or you can, if you're embarrassed, you can just share it with me. So then you would type in my Adrian email address if you want, or my Gmail. I prefer the Gmail, but I guess of course. There, you share it with me. And if you shared it with other people in the class, you're going to do that moving forward. So this is basically how you're going to turn in assignments. You would create a Google Doc, you share it with me. You never print off anything, you never email me anything, because I don't want it like that. Too much email, I don't like it, right? So this is what we're shooting for, okay? When you have a Google Doc saved, it shows up here in your little drive. You can sync this drive with your desktop, however you want to do it. So, the point being, now, you know a little bit about sociology, having 2 weeks lecture. You know a little bit about the expectation. You know a little bit about how we're going to do it, and what I'm kind of looking for, and how we're going to go through the process. And then next week, the publisher is going to come in, who's going to inspire you for writing. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we're going to publish our stuff. We're going to get our drafts up here. We're going to get them all together and talk about them. We're going to give them to the publisher dude. We're going to publish them. Everyone's going to come out of class and be highly sought after by law firms, graduate schools, and industry in general. They're all going to make your dreams come true. All right, we're having 20 minutes early, so if you have any questions, I will be here to answer them all.
At the end of your blog,
Oh, yeah. I work yeah. Anyone? Take one? Come on.
I can only take 5 here. I'll give them out.
Give them away. You don't need so many brownies.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, you should only eat something. Like one and a half.
That's good. Tell your mom thank you for her work.
Oh, you too. I will tell them.
Is because I try to start class out with a little bit more invigorating discussion than boring you with some of this stuff, because it's kind of hard reading. Essentially what I'm doing is writing a boring text, right? And you may find it boring, but I encourage you to read it, because I'm working very hard on trying to convey some important sociological concepts. You know that you don't test in here, but you need to know sociological concepts. So when you write your papers at the end of the semester, I need to get a sense that you understand sociology. In other words, you have to prove to me that you know sociology. And one of the ways to do that is to grasp the concepts, ask me questions, and embed the concepts into your paper. So when I get a final paper, if it's about anything you want it to be on, if it's just 12 pages of rambling, I'll know you didn't come to class, you didn't engage in conversation, you don't understand sociology, you might not get a good grade. But if you really absorb the concepts that we discussed here to begin class with, some of the ones that I relay here, and I even put them in bold in the blog, I just want you to kind of really know sociology. And if I really get a sense that you know it, then we don't have to have tests, and the world is closer to utopia pretty well. So I've done a blog about poverty, work, and class, but I haven't mentioned anything about wages or unfair labor practices or anything like graduate education, and therefore get more higher ed debt. That's actually a hypothesis, actually. I didn't even get to the theory yet. Theory might be something like private school college students are necessary in a system that also involves community colleges and public universities, because that's the best way that the higher ed system functions. That's more of a theory, right? That can't really be proven, and yeah, you can't really prove the fact that the system has to work this way and we need all of these parts together. That's more of a broad theory about how the world works. The same type of theory can be applied to rich and poor people and middle class. What I just described with the college structure was, okay, you've got kind of this higher echelon, you've got this middle echelon, and you've got this lower echelon of higher ed institutions. And my theory is that you need all three of those levels to work in an organized civil society. If you were doing a paper on economics and wage labor, you might say that we need the high income, we need the middle class to a certain proportion, and we need the lower class to a certain proportion. This could be your theory. We'll come to find out that unions or organized labor, these are some of the concepts that we talked about last week and a little bit in the discussion to start class. What I've gone is in the direction of theoretical thought. Early in the course, because the course is shaped like your papers, you're going to learn a little bit of theory. Early in your paper, you're going to present a little bit of theory. Because the way the process through the scientific method is you start with theories and hypotheses of what things might be like in the world. And then you try to support or negate those hypotheses. So you start with a hypothesis, as you might know, an educated guess about something specific. I might hypothesize in this class that the majority of students exit Adrian College with between $50,000 and $100,000 in debt. That might be a hypothesis. Pretty clear-cut educated guess, right? Educated based on the fact that I know now how much tuition is. I'm going to factor in my head a little bit about scholarships and grant funding, and then I'm going to go from there, even dropout rates and stuff like that. So that's a very specific hypothesis. But a broader theory to come out of that would be something like private school students are more likely to pursue theory might be called structural functionalism. A theory that kind of says that we all play a role in the world, and you need kind of the poor people and you need the rich people because everyone's role fits into place in the structure that helps us produce the greatest function, and so kind of semantically then the theory is called structural functionalism. So that's the broader theory. And your paper is going to have some type of theory about how the world works, how the whole world works. And then you're going to kind of whittle that down to a hypothesis, how this specific phenomenon, this class, debt, or something, some phenomenon works. So start with a big theory, how the world works. Whittle it down to, well, how does this phenomenon specifically work? And then you're going to test it through the scientific method. So, one of the ways that you can test phenomenon are through ways of categorizing. I've already categorized economically the high income, middle class, and low income. I've categorized schools into private, public, and community colleges. So sociologists basically, everything we do, we categorize, which is kind of funny because most of us want everyone to be equal, yet we categorize and group and separate people. We all want to live, not all of us, but most sociologists are going to want to eliminate gender stereotypes and, of course, eliminate racism, yet we classify things into race and gender. Okay? So you're going to want to aim to categorize, the whole word up there, something in your project. So if you're thinking about football and you want to talk about pro and amateur athletes, those are categorized. If you want to talk about Canadian Football League and National Football League, those are categories. And so those would be sort of institutional categories. If you want to write a paper about football and you want to look at white and black athletes, you'd be categorizing based on race. If you want to talk about high school and pro versus high school versus pro in some way, shape, or form, maybe actually maybe college versus pro as far as pay scale. You might be looking at the category of age. If you want to talk about women's sports in college versus men's sports and how men's sports tend to produce a greater revenue, you might be doing a paper on gender. I already talked a little bit about income, ways to categorize. A fifth level, or a fifth category is education level, and a sixth is family structure. For example, if you're doing something on the categories of income level, you might say, well, people who come from two-parent households tend to grow up to make